Happy Halloween, golf fans. It's your boy, Gsluke, here with a little DFS preview for this week's Worldwide Technologies Championship. You got a brand new golf course out there, a new puzzle to solve for DFS, and gonna go through what you need to know for this week to go out there and attack those DFS contests. So we'll start with a look at the golf course, bring you some of the key stats that I'm looking at to make my player pool this week, which is gonna be especially important because it's that new venue. And then afterwards, we'll go through a few of my core plays and value plays that I'm getting to for some of my DFS exposure to give you an idea of the kinds of players, the types of, certain plays that I'm looking to get to. Ownership still not really that, solid here early on a Tuesday, but more so going to look at it from the top level perspective at the types of players, the certain types of stats that might help you out with your process. So a lot to get into here. Let's start it off with a look at Cardonal, the brand new venue on tour this week. It'll be our first time looking at a Tiger Woods design, which is a whole, topic of its own out there. But in terms of what we know about Cardonal, it's really not all that much, right? We know that it's long on the scorecard yardage, a little bit over 7,400 yards. So it's safe to say that distance, power is at least going to have some sort of effect on this golf tournament and the results right at the end of the week. And then on top of that, it's a wide open golf course. The average fairway is about 70 yards wide, some of them upwards of 100 yards in terms of width. So it's safe to say that that bomber approach, the kind of spray and pray mentality that you see at tour events from time to time, is going to be the optimal strategy. Probably not the only strategy, right, to go out there and find success, but certainly on paper seems like what you'd want to have in an ideal situation. On top of that, a lot of the par fours require mid to long irons in. 3 of the 4 par 3s are going to be on the longer end of the spectrum, 190 yards plus. So those are additional long irons that you'll hit. And then, of course, on the par 5s, 3 of which that are between 550 and 600 yards, you're going to be hitting a long iron into those greens. So off the tee distance, right, being able to hit the ball country mile is going to be helpful. And then on top of that, there's going to be a bunch of long irons. So if you're going to look at any stat category this week at a course that we haven't seen before in play, right, those two are almost for sure going to be important, right? Just based on the shots that we know the players are going to have to hit, there's almost no refuting that, right? So there are certainly a lot of unknowns this week, but from the ball striking perspective, we can kind of figure out what these players are going to be facing, right? So that's not as much of an unknown. Any real pushback on the fact that power and long irons are going to be important this week, I think is a little bit outrageous. Outside of that, it's completely unknown, right? This might be a par 5 scoring course. We don't know. We've never seen it in play. This might be a putting contest for all we know. The greens might be real easy to putt out there. We don't know that, right? So what we're going to focus on here, what my modeling really emphasizes this week, is what we actually know about Cardonal, right? What is actionable, what we can use. And when it comes to putting stats, we know they'll be extremely slow past palm greens. First off, every single set of past palm greens is going to be slow. I can tell you that from experience down here in South Florida. And we know that they're past palm grass, right? So what can we focus on from the putting perspective? The speed and then the type of grass, right? And then just looking at recent form coming in. Birdie or better percentage, this is a resort style golf course. So I don't think it's a hot take to say that, birdie or better percentage is going to be important, right? Anytime you see a winning score of like 20, sometimes even better than 20 under par, that is a key indicator of the players that can get to that type of score. In terms of comp courses, they're hardly even being utilized in my modeling this week. It is more so these top 3 stats, and it's the stuff that we know, right? We know driving distance probably going to play a factor, right? The putting on past palm, something you can look at. Just focus on what you can control this week, and I would try and keep as much speculation as possible out of your modeling because we really just don't know on a lot of this stuff out there. So with that being said, what kind of players am I looking for? Well, up top, I think Cameron Young gives you a good idea of the types of players that I think might get some top end upside. So when we're taking a player up here in that 10K plus range, 11-2 there with a Ludwig Aberg, you want somebody that can win the golf tournament, somebody with enough horsepower to go out there, win this by maybe 2-3 shots, right? You want that kind of upside with your 10K golfer. And Cameron Young, also on top of the upside, fits a few of the key characteristics I'm looking for in players this week. So if we take a look at the power metrics, we know he's one of the longest players on tour, so he's going to fit that driving distance bucket quite well. But also, when you take a look at his approach distribution, he's really good with the long irons, right? I mean, we've seen some of the approaches on par fives. That's well documented how high he can hit the ball, but it's also translating with his play from 150 to 175 yards, 175 yards to 200 yards, are all the top 30, top 40 kind of percentile outcomes for Cameron Young, right? So he's not always like top 10, top 20 on tour, but he's always up there in the top half of all of the long iron buckets, whereas some of the shorter ones, for example, like from 125 to 150 yards, it's a spot where Cameron Young tends to struggle a little bit out there. So if anything, he likes the long irons. He's a power player. And then on past palm grass, we don't have a sample. So unfortunately, he's not the type of player that we can say loves this style of grass. But maybe with that unknown comes a lot of positive, right? Maybe it is a surface that he really likes, or of course, it'd be a surface that he hates out there. And that unknown is there with almost every golfer in the field. Now, our next core play, I just have to put the disclaimer out there, is not somebody that's a huge unknown when it comes to past palm grass, but don't hold that against players, right? Don't make that a reason that you can't play somebody, because Aberg, you could say the same thing about, right? Jaeger does have a large sample. He's actually been pretty poor in past palm, so he's one of the few players that you can probably say that with confidence. But outside of that, like Glover has 4 rounds on past palm. Dietrich, guys like Spawn, Svensson down here, all have less than 8 measured rounds on past palm grass. Don't make it your end all be all, right? With Cameron Young, just a few other things to note out here. I do think that Aberg and Theegala are going to be a much higher owned than what you have here with Cameron Young. So part of the play, part of the stipulation here is that you're getting a slightly lower owned Cameron Young. Now, if it comes to Wednesday and he's actually going to be the same, if not higher ownership than the 2 guys around him, then I will 100% pivot to an Aberg or Theegala. Aberg, Theegala playing much better golf of late, right? If we take a look at the recent form rankings, especially over the last 12 measured rounds, right? They're lapping him, right? He's hardly better than the tour average player. That's Cameron Young. And then you look at Theegala and Aberg, and they're gaining over 2 strokes a round. So that's why I think the ownership is going to go to the Abergs, the Theegalas of the world. But when you're in this fall swing, when we don't even have many events to work with, right? The sample size for many of the players, Aberg's all from the fall, but like everyone else up top, right? Most of the stats are from last season, which are like 2 months back at this point. Like they're ludicrous to really look at that kind of stats. Like we can kind of throw those to the side, right? And, Aberg's, I think, a slam dunk play. Like he's definitely going to be chalky this week. But if Cam Young is significantly lower owned than Theegala, and I know he won a few starts back, top 20 at the Zozo was like okay for Theegala. If he's going to be way lower owned, that's a huge mistake in my book, right? This is the part of the year where you kind of throw those stats to the side. Sure, we want to look for power players. Like we know Cameron Young long-term is a pretty good long iron player. Those are the kind of stats that I'm okay looking at. But if you're looking at like the last 8 to 12 measured rounds, right, and trying to make decisions between players, that's where I think you're getting a little bit out of bounds. That's where I think you're making a mistake, right, with your process on this kind of week. So up top, a lot of it comes down to ownership and also just a player that's fitting my long-term profile for the course. Like I said, you don't want to get too out of hand with making those decisions, but you've got to draw the line at some point, right? You've got to make your decisions on your player pool using some sort of metric. And for me, he checks a lot of the boxes that at least I'm looking for this week, and is why I imagine I'll be going that direction in a lot of my lineups. Next up, we've got somebody that's a little bit of a different play, and I mentioned the whole past palm grass thing, but anytime we've had measured rounds at any of my comp courses in the field, Emiliano Grillo is a top 5 player in pretty much every metric, and that includes putting, which is way uncharacteristic for this sort of player, right? Grillo is a lifetime loser with the flat stick, has been a lot better of late with the putter. You can see over his last 36 rounds, for example, he's actually been a slight gainer, right? 0.4 strokes per round with that flat stick. But long term, right, this is somebody that's losing 0.4, 0.5 strokes per round with that putter. So anytime we used to play him on past palm, it was a huge difference when it came to his shots gained. You can see compared to his last 36 rounds, right, it's only 0.31 shots better. But if you compare this 0.71 shots to his career baseline, it's like a stroke and a half difference, especially compared to some of the more poor surfaces that he puts on, like Poa Nua, that he's atrocious on when it comes to his stats. So Emiliano Grillo going to be much better on this kind of surface than most weeks, and I know he's from down there in Argentina, right? He honestly played most of his golf in his life outside of Argentina, so to use the whole like hometown narrative thing that he's used to past palm, I think is a mistake as well. But at the same time, the stats don't lie. He has over a 20-round sample size on paspalum grass and is gaining nearly 3/4 of a stroke per round, right? Which I said is just a huge glaring difference compared to his career baseline. The only real argument against him, and it's the same as Cam Young, right, is that the recent form isn't all that good, but I would actually argue against that, right? Last time out, Grillo was much better than people realized. He finished T10 over there at the Zozo Championship. Did have a few missed cuts in there, but this is the fall swing, right? Guys are taking time off. Guys are going to be rusty, only playing, 2 or 3 starts during this entire part of the season. You kind of got to give him a little bit of a break, right? And long term, Grillo, winner on tour, right? Winner last year, the recent event out there was it the Charles Schwab Challenge? Did that good thing for the kid out there in the playoff? Right, that karma got him the win that week. And at $9,700, we don't necessarily need a win, right? This is the kind of field that is wide open. I'd say outside of like the top 3 players that I think have a lot more win equity than pretty much everybody else, it's wide open after that, right? And if one of these top 3 players doesn't win, even if they do, right, Grillo could be your second man in, right? You don't necessarily need him to win the golf tournament. But if one of these 3 doesn't win, right, Grillo, you just need that top 5 finish from him, right? You're expecting a little bit less. Sure, you're paying $9,700, but it's the kind of week where everyone's a lot more expensive than they should be. So I'm okay with the recent form. I know a lot of people probably won't want to play him because of that, but he's coming in off a top 10 finish. He's really good on paspalum for his career, and it's the time of year to throw those kind of stats to the window. So my modeling doesn't love him, right? He's number 79 in terms of total model ranking, number 58 up there for Cameron Young, but like I said, it's not a week that I'm marrying myself to the model. It's not a week where I'm going to go out there and only play guys that look good per the metrics because there's just so much noise going around. I mean, Cameron Young, when's the last time this guy even played? Let's look, it's the BMW Championship, right? Second to last event of the playoffs. Like all of his shots gained, right, that are causing him to be number 58th in the model are from way last season, right? And Grillo, right, the reason why he's so terrible in terms of that is because of how poorly he played at the Tour Championship, right? An event that was no cut. He didn't care by the end of the week, right? He was going to make, marginal differences in money based on shots. He just didn't give a heck. He didn't, that was not the word I wanted to use there, but you get the point, right? His T29 here, right, would normally be pretty good finish for somebody. He lost like 20 strokes to the field. Don't let that keep you off of somebody. A one event sample that is a huge outlier because of the format of the event, right? Don't let that be the reason that you're not getting to somebody up top. That being said, I want to remind you guys, these sheets that you see in my videos are available on my Patreon page. So if you've been wondering how to get access to all of my projections and modeling, check out the link in the description. Down there, you can get access to just the DFS stuff that I post, also some of the prop different posts that I'm posting over there for PGA, Eurogolf, all that sort of fun stuff. So make sure to check that out. Supports the channel, gives you access to these, cheat sheets that you can use for your own data, your own analysis, and should simplify and quicken your process quite a bit. So that's the idea there. Check it out if that's something you've been wondering about, and for my entire player pool and projections for this week. But moving on to our last 2 plays, we've got Davis Riley, who's the first player we'll focus on here, and this is really a course fit angle. Now, the paspalum numbers are fantastic, right? Gaining over 2 strokes per round, that is completely unsustainable, right? So let's not think that that's the reason that we're getting to Davis Riley. It's more so that he's a bomber off the tee, right? He's a player that has that distance that we're looking for, usually gains quite significantly there off the tee, and a pretty good approach player and putter, right? Over the last 36 rounds, maybe not the best with the flat stick, but we've slowly but surely saw Davis Riley. We've seen him come into some form, right? So the off the tee a little bit better than the last 36 rounds, still doing his thing with the approach play, and though he's been a little bit inconsistent with the flat stick, the few times we've seen him on paspalum, and again, don't go too crazy with this. It's a small sample. He's gaining over 2 strokes per round, right? And now, don't expect to see that kind of performance, but if he goes out there and he's even just a marginally positive putter, let's say he gains like a stroke or 2 over the week, maybe is even just a neutral putter by the end of the week, that's a made cut, maybe even a top 25 finish. For real top 5 or even winning upside if he gains even half the strokes, right, that he typically gains on this surface. So maybe there is something to the small sample, right? He goes out there, he continues to putt well on paspalum. Even if he doesn't, I still think he's a solid play this week. So the ownership shouldn't be out of hand. The recent form hasn't been too great for Davis Riley. So if we go over here and take a look at it, T31, T28, and then a missed cut mixed in over the last 3 starts. A lot of the reason I like him for DFS even more more so than from like an outright perspective or betting him for like a top 10, top 20 kind of bet is because he outpaces his placement in terms of birdies, right? He's the type of player that is extremely aggressive. He's a decent putter. I think that's part of the reason he's able to cash in for so many birdies. The unfortunate part is he normally sprays it off the tee. It's something that I mentioned earlier. The reason why distance is kind of what I'm looking at as opposed to driving accuracy is you have these like 80 to 100 yard wide fairways, right? That is going to be a huge advantage for guys like Davis Riley, right? Guys that can't keep it on planet Earth. You can throw Cameron Young out there, right? He can spray it from time to time. Griot's pretty accurate, so I'm not that worried about Griot, regardless of golf course, but I do worry about guys like a Davis Riley. So I like that for him. The modeling for the golf course is reflective, right? The pass palm numbers, the driving stats, the approach stats are all extremely favorable for Riley. And if you look at the long iron stuff too, he checks that box. So if you're looking for a course fit, at least based on what we know about Cardonal, which again, it's not saying that much, right? We haven't seen it in play. He looks like a great play on paper. And then our last play here, the last value play we're getting to is very similar to Davis Riley. In fact, I'd say it's like a Davis Riley light. Somebody who's a little bit younger, right? A lot fresher, a lot greener out there on the PGA Tour. He's $7,300 and fits the same kind of stat profile. An absolute striper off the tee. You can see gaining 0.4 strokes per round. Marginal gainer on approach. He's at least tour average out there. Has had some better weeks, some better stretches for sure when it comes to the iron play, and then a really good putter. So he's got the off the tee we're looking for, putter at a birdie fest, at a, putting contest, as John Rahm would put it out there. And then the long iron play, if you zoom in on his stat profile with the irons, the short stuff's terrible. He's not a good wedge player. For whatever reason, when you give him, one of those feeler shots, he's not going to get the job done. Kind of like his around the green, right? Not the best, right? A loser in that category. But with the long irons, he's like top 25 in, at least 2 of the 4 categories up there towards the top. So you like that for Peter Kest. He's very similar to a Davis Riley, right? Where he's a striper off the tee, can get real hot with that putter, and he's cheap at $7,300, and I don't think he's going to be mega chalky, right? He'll get some ownership. People like playing Peter Kest. He's another player that far outpaces his placement when it comes to birdie production. Just an extremely aggressive player, and when you tend to be a really good like off the tee and putter, you just make a lot of birdies, right? It's like Wyndham Clark makes a bunch of birdies out there. That's part of the reason that he's especially attractive for GPP and DFS sort of contest. So I like that for Peter Kest. You're going to get some leverage out there with the ownership and another player that fits that mold I'm looking for. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for the DFS preview this week. I appreciate all the support here in the channel, so make sure you smash that like button on the way out of here and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content in the future. We'll have a DFS live stream coming tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll be going through the weather, all of your live questions on there, and talking a little bit about the chalk and how to navigate your DFS contest. So any questions that you have, we'll cater the content for you guys out there. It just makes sure you're ready to go and fire on your exposure. So looking forward to it. Again, I appreciate all the support here, guys. Best of luck with all of your lineups, any outright bets that you decide to go with, and let's go out there and have ourselves a weekend.